That's Steve McDonald. We're going to turn our attention to another part of China now, because in the country's so-called re-education camps, women have been systematically raped and tortured. This according to first-hand accounts obtained by the BBC. It's estimated more than 1 million men and women have been detained in the camps in China's northwest Xinjiang region. China itself claims that those camps are education centres to de-radicalise, Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities. Our correspondent Matthew Hill has been speaking to a number of former detainees and workers there. You may find some of their accounts distressing.
Tarsanai Zaiwudan is reliving a story she can barely bring herself to tell. She was held at one of Xinjiang's so-called re-education camps. These satellite images show the site where Tarsanai says she was held, sharing a cell with 13 other women with a bucket for a toilet. And she's haunted by one image: masked men coming down a camp corridor like this one after midnight.
They were 3 men. Not one, but 3. They did whatever evil their mind could think of. And they didn't spare any part of my body, biting it to the extent that it was disgusting to look at. They didn't just rape, they were barbaric. They had bitten all over my body.
The US have granted her safe refuge after investigating her claims. She's waived her right to anonymity and now feels free to speak out about the full extent of the abuse she says she suffered.
They had an electric baton. I didn't know what it was. It was pushed into my private parts and I was tormented with electric shocks.
It's estimated over 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslims are held in the camps. These never-before-broadcast pictures were filmed secretly in a camp under construction and published by a magazine on religious liberty. We've interviewed a former guard and seen his Chinese police documents. He's the first ever to come forward, and the risk of him speaking to the BBC is so great, we've reconstructed the interview with an actor.
Those who were taken inside were locked in a cell which held 8 to 16 inmates. There were cameras watching them all the time, and there were books about Xi Jinping. They have to study the book and memorize them in Chinese. If they fell, the punishment was severe.
Many former camp inmates flee to Istanbul. Some talk of having to choose between punishment or being complicit in these crimes.
I worked 6 months as a cleaning worker for the women. Han Chinese men would pay money to have their pick of the pretty young inmates.
This was the first time Gulzira has told anyone the full extent of what she says she was forced to do.
My job is to remove their clothes completely and then handcuff them on their beds so they cannot move.
We can't say if the rape is approved by the camp commanders or even by those more senior, but the accounts of the many women I've spoken to include gang rape in public and are similar in brutality. The Uyghur rights group that helped Tarsanai get to America say their full stories don't emerge until later.
Survivors of the camps have told of horrific tortures. Very often sexual abuse, however, is told in less detail. It's traumatic to remember, and women are often afraid of bringing shame to their own family members.
The Chinese government said in a statement that the Xinjiang camps offered vocational and educational training to tackle extremism and terrorism. It did not address directly the accusations of rape and torture, but it added the Chinese government attaches great importance to women's rights. Lies and absurd accusations, including mass detention, do not hold water.
It is very obvious. Their goal is to destroy everyone. And everyone knows it. These women are done.
Much of the testimony of the women, like Tersanai I've spoken to, is too disturbing to broadcast. But it's important, they say, that the world knows what's happened to them. Matthew Hill, BBC News.
Because Nusrat Ghani is a Conservative Party MP who's been a leading voice on the Uyghurs and human rights issues here in the UK. She's been looking at ways to sanction China for its treatment of the Uyghur community. And I asked her if she was satisfied the British government was doing enough to put pressure on China.
The issue is that the women have provided testimonies not just of the abuse that they are suffering, which is orchestrated rape, forced sterilizations, and they're also being removed from their families. We have up to 2 million Uyghur in prison camps, and the products that are produced from those camps end up on the shelves around the world. So of course we need to do as much as we can to expose supply chains, British company supply chains to the region. That has to be exposed, and we need to do as much as we can to deter slave labour products within our supply chains.
Right, for that to work, Nusrat, sorry to interrupt you, but for that to work, there needs to be an international understanding of that, doesn't there?
Absolutely, and there has been with countries like America or Australia, but it doesn't go far enough because we need to expose what's happening in Xinjiang, which is why at the moment we are exploring the trade bill in the UK Parliament, and I have tabled a genocide amendment. At the moment, the term genocide can only be investigated in a judicial setting. It's within the UN international courts, but we know countries like China and Russia will use everything they can, every power they can to stop that happening. So I'm asking the UK government, as we know that the UN court is not going to be capable of investigating genocide, especially when it comes to Uyghur, we should undertake our obligation under the UN Charter and have an investigation here in the UK.
Right, but let me just make the point, though, that you put amendments to the trade bill before Parliament. It was rejected. I mean, that's the truth. It was close, but it was rejected. And it seems unlikely that it's going to be terribly effective if one country only pursues a genocide route when others don't. Doesn't it need to be an international, multilateral, collective perspective?
It does need to be international, which is why we'll be working with our partners around the world. The genocide amendment, the old genocide amendment was defeated. We tabled a new one, which came back with an even bigger majority in the House of Lords and will be back in the House of Commons next week. And we're going to do everything that we can to explain to our colleagues why it is important that internationally, if we cannot rely on the UN, then we must use our domestic courts to allow people like the Uyghur to present a case and on the balance of evidence to see if a genocide is taking place. One of the markers of genocide, if I may, one of the markers of genocide is an absolute destruction of a race. And the Chinese authorities have been quite forthcoming in sharing that the birth rate of the Uyghur has dropped by 84%.
Yeah,
that is a deliberate act by a state.
British MP Nusrat Ghani there. And you